All right, good morning. How's everybody? Good. Good deal. We're still in Exodus. Hope that doesn't bother you. We're still in Exodus. Uh, Exodus, and I want us to we're going to look at chapters 32 and 33. That's the plan this morning. So if you want to make your way there. We covered quite a bit last week. There is one little thing that I want us just to kind of point out that I find interesting. I'm not 100% sure what to make of it, which there's a lot of that. But back in chapter 31. So after going through the instructions for the tabernacle, all the way that all this is going to need to be built, the priest's clothing, all of that, we've made our way through that. We look at all of the furnishings. We have the altar of incense. There's the basin that the priests are going to use to wash as they come in and service in the tabernacle. And then in chapter 31, there's just these two sections. In the first section there between verses 1 through 11, mention a couple of people in particular that God has given abilities to. Right? There's one that's going to kind of direct the furnishings, the making of the furnishings. The other one's going to direct the building of the tabernacle itself. And these are God-given abilities that he's given, which I think is easy enough for us to kind of think about in our own lives, right? That God has gifted us in some way for something specific, and that we use that for whatever it is that He's asked of us. But this next part is what I find interesting, is that here again is the Sabbath at the end of chapter 31. On this side of the cross, we don't talk a lot about the Sabbath, but this seems to be incredibly important, right? Above all, this is verse 12, or I'm sorry, verse 13. Above all, you shall keep my Sabbaths. Right? In all of this, we're going to build this tabernacle. I'm going to come and my presence is going to dwell among you, but do not forget this. Right? It's a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. You keep the Sabbath because it's holy for you. Everyone who profanes it will be put to death. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days' work shall be done, but the seventh is a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath will be put to death. The people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing Sabbath throughout their generations as a covenant forever. It's a sign forever between me and all the people of Israel, that in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested. I mean, it's right there, and it's like we cannot get away from it. I think we mentioned this when we talked about the 10 Commandments. If you think about that as some do, as what they call the 10 words. If you only have 10, right, you only have these 10 words. He used 10 words to describe what it is that he wants. One of them is about Sabbath, and it's, I believe, the longest section in the 10 Commandments. And then here it pops up again. I think maybe we're going to find a relation to that with what we're getting ready to read next. Okay? And it may be a weird connection, but I think it's there. All right? So here we go. Let's go to chapter 32. When the people saw that Moses was delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said, "Up, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So Aaron said to them, "Take off the rings of gold that are in your ears, in the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, bring them to me." All the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears, brought them to Aaron. He received the gold from their hand, fashioned it with a graving tool, and made a golden calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it And Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." They rose up early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Let's leave it right there for just a second. I don't want us to dismiss Israel too quickly. This seems to be, this is my opinion, and you can disagree with it, that's fine. This seems to be an act of panic on their part. If you go back a little ways in Exodus, you find, it's in chapter 20, I believe, when God shows up on the mountain. And we see all of the things, right? You see the earthquake and the fire and the smoke and all that, and they hear the voice, and they say, right? The people of Israel say to Moses, "You go talk to him," right? And then you come back and you tell us what he said, because we don't want to do that, because unless we die, I think is how that's worded. So for the people who are at the bottom of the mountain, Moses is their connection to the God who delivered them, and he's the only connection they have. Right? And they've set themselves up that way, but this is kind of how this has worked. And so we're panicked. It's 40 days that Moses is on the mountain. So somewhere in that time frame that you can hear it from what they say. As for this Moses, right? This guy, whoever this guy is, right? We don't know if he's coming back or not. And so here we are out here, and we need something. And so it still bothers me, and it's probably going to till I die. And that is Aaron's role in this. I'm sorry, it bugs me. I don't mind saying that. It confuses me that what the role that Aaron's going to play in this, and then in a very short amount of time, Aaron is going to be anointed as the high priest. And that bothers me. But I think maybe bothers me about that is that maybe it shines a light on the fact that I don't understand God's grace as well as I think I do, right? Because that's a giant act of grace, if it looks that way to me, for Aaron to serve as high priest after this. Okay, so he makes a calf. Many of the folks that I've read along with this agree on this. I'm certain that some don't. But that the calf itself, okay, I don't know that this makes much difference, but maybe it helps. The calf itself is not supposed to be God. Okay? We try to think about where these people are and what they've done and who they're around. In the ancient Near East, many of the gods, these are the pedestal for the god is a bull, right? That the god would ride the bull, right? And so it's almost as if they're making a replacement for the mercy seat, although they don't know anything about that yet, right? But Moses does. But they've made this place because this connection, and so this is how we're going to make it, right? A little different for me is the language that's used there. These are your gods. Okay, that's a tough one. I know enough about Hebrew to get me in a lot of trouble. Okay, so here we go. The word that gets translated for God, Elohim, can certainly, it is the same word whether it's plural or whether it's singular. And it's the context that makes the difference. That's how a lot of times how that's translated. That's the way I get it. So you can think, well, maybe this is your God. However, the word these are your gods. That's what it does. As these are your gods that brought you out of the land of Egypt. Now, again, I try to. I hope we extend them some grace. It's hard to because of just what they've seen, but also 400 or so years of culture can have this effect on you, I believe. They come from a place where there are multiple gods. This is what they've known for generations until the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob showed up. And now, so some of this is strange. What Israel is attempting to do here is to undo what it is that God's done. Okay? So stay with me just a second. The very first command from God is what? The very first command out of the 10. What is it? No, the very first one out of the 10 commandments? No other gods before me. But yes, right? And followed closely on its heels, you will make nothing to represent me. Okay? And what's the first thing we do? Right? These are your gods that brought you out of the land of Egypt, and here it is. An image that does that. After the end of the book of the covenant, Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, the other two sons, have trouble remembering their names, but 70 of the elders of Egypt go up on the mountain, and they do what? They eat and drink with the God of Israel as a sign of the sealing of the covenant. And Aaron built, and we eat and we drink with these gods. We're going to make the covenant with this God that we've fashioned. Okay? And so we have a real problem. Right.
They probably brought them with them. And so when they had the calf, they probably brought out every island they had in their possession, and therefore it became plural.
Could be possible, right? And again, the place in which they've grown up, this is what it looks like. It's also, there's just so many little things when you stop and think about it. So you have them building their own mercy seat, right? If we can think of it that way. Or God will meet them from above this, right? This golden calf. When they get ready to build the tabernacle, what's the first thing that Moses is asked them to do? Is to make donations, right? Everybody give, make an offering to God so you can build this tabernacle. What does everybody do? Give me your gold and we'll build it. And we have that same thing again, right? It's a cheap imitation. Can we call it that? A cheap imitation of what God's really after. And so they do it. All right, here we go. Verse 7. The Lord said to Moses, "Go down, for your people whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way that I commanded them. They have made for themselves a golden calf and have worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt.' And the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people. Behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, in order that I may make a great nation of you." Okay. Funny's not the right word, and I'm looking for the right word. Maybe I'll find it later. But it's maybe ironic. Maybe that's it. That the fight now is going to be, or disagreement, let's put it that way, between Moses and God is going to be on who do these people belong to. Right? As God has given Moses all of this, right, he's written with his finger the commandments on the stone tablets. And then he goes, I need you to go back down the mountain because your kids are acting up. Right? Your people that you brought out of the land of Egypt, they have corrupted themselves. And he tells Moses exactly what they've done. He goes, now go. Because leave me alone. This God's saying, leave me alone, that I will, so that I can destroy them. And I'll start over with you. He gives Moses, I think there's something to this, he gives Moses the option to be the new Abraham. Right? Isn't that the promise to Abraham? You come with me, and I will make you a great nation. I will make of you a great nation. And when he gets to the mountain and we see all the trouble, what he says to Moses is of going, they're done, and I'll start again with you, and I'll make you a great nation. Now, I got to tell you, it's a pretty tempting offer, right? I mean, we haven't even got very far into this journey from Egypt to Canaan. And already, these people have been a large pain in the rear end, haven't they? I mean, it's one thing after another. And it's almost, you almost see Moses going down the mountain going, I can't leave you alone for anything, right? You can't behave. Intercession number 1. Moses implored the Lord his God and said, O Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with a great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, with evil intent did he bring them out, to kill them in the mountains and consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your burning anger and relent from this disaster against your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self, and said to them, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have promised I will give to your offspring, and they shall inherit it forever. And the Lord relented from the disaster that he had spoken of bringing on his people. There's a huge, if we've paid attention, it's easy to miss, by the way, because there's so much that happens. There's so much that happens in Exodus between chapter 3 and where we are now. So if chapters 3 through 5 has Moses arguing with God, right? Yes? No? Maybe? Right? Because God says, you're going to go back to Egypt, and Moses says, oh, no, I'm not. Right? Doesn't say quite that direct, but he looks for every reason to say, no, it's not me. I'm not doing it. You know, who am I? Who are you? I don't speak so well. I mean, no, he does everything until finally he just goes, I just don't want to do it. And God says, no, you're the one. You're going to go back and you're going to do this. And Moses relents. And now God and Moses are wrestling with something else, because Moses has come into what it is that God has asked him to do in chapter 3. Moses is now the person who's going to intercede on behalf of Israel instead of on behalf of Moses. And here he is. It's not my people. These aren't my people. They're your people. Think about that for just a minute, and this just popped to mind, so that's always dangerous. By birth, right? These are Moses' people. By Moses' growth into adulthood, they're not. Right? The Egyptians are his people. That's how he's raised. Right? And so in a way, you've got Moses going, they're not my people. Right? They're not. And the only reason that I'm here is because they're your people. And they're your people that you've made a promise to. Now, this is really, really difficult. Right? And this jumps into water that I can't navigate, okay? I'm not sure I'm smart enough to do this. Because this is really, really tough. Because this gets into all kinds of things. But when we watch God change his mind, that gets dicey. I mean, doesn't it? If Moses can change the mind of God, then that gets into all kinds of things that people will ask about, right? Is God really sovereign? What did Moses do here? I mean, it's really, really crazy. But one of the things that I hope that we're going to see, and we're not done, we're not close to done yet, as we make this little trip, Moses' trips up and down the mountain here, and there's more than this one, is that what we see come in conflict again, which we see come in conflict over and over and over again, is the holiness of God and the unholiness of Israel, and what's going to happen when those two come together, right? And how these things are going to work. And Moses says, these are your people. And in case you've forgotten, it's not like God has forgotten, right? In case you've forgotten, these are the people to whom you made the promise. Remember Abraham and Isaac and Israel, your servants. Remember why we're here to start with. It's because you're leading them out. And I don't know, maybe I'm reading this wrong. But there's a part of me that reads this Moses' intercession with God of going, if not for their sake, for yours. Right? Because what are the Egyptians going to say about you? Remember why we did all of this, right? Remember why you did all of this. You did all of this to exercise judgment on the gods of Egypt so that people will know who you are. And now if you bring them out here and you kill them, then what's that going to say about you? And so Moses intercedes and God says, okay. Then Moses, let's go to this. Moses goes down the mountain. Verse 15. Yes. Moses turned down from the mountain with the two tablets of testimony and tablets that were written on the sides, on the front and the back, they were written. The tablets were the work of God. The writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. When Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, there's a noise of war in the camp. But he said, it's not the sound of shouting or victory, or the sound of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing that I hear. And as soon as he came near the camp, he saw the calf and the dancing. Moses' anger burned hot, and he threw the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf that they had made, burned it with fire, ground it to powder, and scattered it on the water, and made the people Israel drink it. Okay, that's a weird little thing there too, but we're going to get to that in a second. All right. The undoing, right? We've talked about that. The Israel making their own version of God with them, rather than what God has in mind for God to be with them. Moses comes down the mountain, and we've kind of got the picture. Moses is the only one that gets to go all the way up the mountain. Part of the way up the mountain is Joshua. And so as he's coming back down the mountain, lo and behold, he runs to Joshua, and they start back down, and he says, Joshua says, I hear the noise, it's got to be a battle, right? There's something going on down there. And Moses says, no, it's not either one of those. It's not the shout of victory, it's not the cry of defeat, it's singing. What did Israel do as soon as they crossed the Red Sea? They sang. And here they are again. This is they're celebrating this God that they've made with their own hands that's delivered them out of the hands of Egypt. You can almost hear it. I mean, it doesn't say there, but our imagination can run a little bit. You can almost hear them going and looking at this calf and bowing down to it and going, because you, right? You threw the horse and rider into the sea, right? You are the one who rescued us. And Moses throws the tablets and breaks them. Now, I haven't dug into this enough, okay? I'm just going to throw this out, and we can think about it. One of the responses is that it's Moses' anger, which I think that's quite obvious. Somebody that I ran across recently that wrote about this, and they said that Moses broke the words of God in front of them, right? because they didn't deserve them. That what God had rescued Israel for was this law that he's given them that's going to reshape them and reform them into the people that they're called to be. And if they're going to do this, they don't deserve them. I thought that was interesting. The weird thing, right? And so we're going to have, I want you to hold on to this thing for just a second in your mind of Moses grinding up the calf, putting it in the water and making them drink. Okay? There's no explanation of this given here at all. And the only explanation I've got, it comes a little bit later, and we'll see if they tie together. But I want you to hold on to that for a minute because I want to finish the rest of this. Here we go. Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you that you've brought such a great sin on them?" I like that, right? You know, what did they do to you that you'd make them do this, right? That you'd let them do this? And Aaron said, "Let not the anger of my Lord burn hot." And he's talking about Moses' anger here. "You know the people, they're set on evil." And so instead of standing in front of it, no, I didn't say that. "For they said to me, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what's become of him." So far, so good. "So I said, let any who have gold take it off. They gave it to me. I threw it into the fire, and out came a calf." Okay, now, come on. I mean, that's, there's a couple of schools of thought this, and I don't know. I think this is probably some of both. Is that, one, it's obvious that Moses is angry, right? I mean, that seems obvious. And so when he confronts Aaron, Aaron's doing his best to mitigate Moses' anger toward him, right? So they gave me their gold, I threw it in the fire, boom, look what happened, right? The other side of that could be, and I'm not saying it's not some of both, is that what maybe Aaron is hoping for is that if he says it this way, that maybe Moses in somehow or another would see this as some sort of a miraculous thing that happens. Right? And that really, he shouldn't be mad because maybe God's behind it. Now, again, Aaron's in a bad spot here because, I mean, come on. There's no way he's coming out of this looking good. Right? But it seems that Moses is going, I ain't buying it. Right? We just move on. Moses saw that the people had broken loose, for Aaron had let them break loose, to the derision of their enemies. Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered around him. And he said to them, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, put your sword on your side, each of you. Go to and fro from gate to gate throughout the camp, and each of you kill his brother and his companion and his neighbor." The sons of Levi did according to the words of Moses, and that day about 3,000 men of the people fell. And Moses said, "Today you have been ordained for the service of the Lord, each one at the cost of his son and of his brother, so that he might bestow a blessing upon you this day." This is weird, okay? That's my opinion. Moses says, I want you to go. Who's with me, right? That's the first thing. Who's with me? And it's the Levites. The Levites are going to be the people, right? And I don't think, and we've read through this, we haven't necessarily, dug down into each verse up to this point, but it's the Levites who are going to serve as the ones who minister before God. And I think this is where we get that, and this is where this is one of the places where they're set apart. So the Levites all come, and Moses says, "Okay, strap your sword on. I want you to go through the camp from gate to gate." And he just says, "Kill him," right? And that's all he says. There's no indication of who. There's no indication of anything. Isn't that what it says? Each of you kill his brother, his companion, and his neighbor. And so the Levites go through, and miraculously, I say miraculously because if the numbers are somewhere right when we think about how many came out of Egypt, 3,000. It's not all that many, right? I mean, it's a lot of folks, but it's not all that many as compared to the number of people who are there. So why these 3,000? This is a really strange connection, and it may, I always love this, right? It may or may not be right. How about that? I do think that this ties back in some way, although it's not spelled out here, right? There's nothing given. Why these 3,000 and why not the rest of them? Okay? I think you're onto something there. I do. Ray, did you have something? I'm sorry.
We have a hard time believing that a holy God, while he can't lie, reserves the right to change his mind. And the Jews at that time, a lot of things about Christ were kind of vague in the Old Testament and hidden from them, and they didn't understand that the promise wasn't just to the Jewish people, but to uncircumcised Gentile people as well.
Right.
And we've got to understand that God still has the right to change his mind, and we don't know everything. That's a part of faith and a part of worshiping, that we still trust God.
Right.
That we don't know everything.
Right. And that's hard to admit too, that we don't know everything. Right? But here I go. I don't know this, but here we go. All right. So, Bill, to your point, the 3,000 may be the ringleaders of this. Although there's nothing, unless I've missed it, there's nothing that really says this. There's a really weird thing, which there's a lot of things that I think that are weird. That's probably not the right terminology. Here I'm not way off, which, I mean, I could be way off, but okay. You can go read this if you'd like to, or you can just write this down and go read it later. But here's the broad strokes of it. Numbers chapter 5. Okay, and Numbers chapter 5, and part of and some more of the instructions on how Israel is going to behave. There's this really, to us, okay, it's really strange. This test for whether or not a wife has been unfaithful. I mean, it's probably not something that we committed to memory, probably not memory verses that are going on in the back right now. But the broad strokes of it are this, that if a husband suspects that his wife is unfaithful, right, that she's committed adultery, that there's a certain thing that there's a test for this that she's supposed to go through, administered by the priest. And it involves some dust from something, I can't remember, I don't know all the details, but it involves the dust from these things swept into something and mixed up, and she drinks it. And if she's guilty, something physically about her will change. Okay? And, she's guilty, and if not, then she's innocent. Right? It's in Numbers chapter 5. It's a strange thing. But when you look at this, there's something to me that seems like it's related. Now, Moses ground up the calf, he mixed it in the water, and he said, drink it, and the 3,000 are the ones, Bill, that maybe have been the ringleaders or the ones that push this, and they are the ones that there's some identifying mark now because of that. I just think that's fascinating, and it's kind of strange. And again, I always like those places where I could be wrong, but we don't really know. That's always fun, all right? That's not necessarily the important part, because the important part comes next, or another important part comes next. Let's do it this way. Verse 30. The next day, Moses said to the people, "You have sinned a great sin. And now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Alas, this people has sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written." And the Lord said to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. But now, go lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I will visit their sin upon them. The Lord sent a plague on the people because they made the calf the one that Aaron made. Our author is not going to let us forget who made this calf, right? He's already done that once. You know, and the people broke loose because Aaron let them. And then at the end of going, the calf that Aaron made, right? I don't know if this, you know, maybe there's an axe to grind there or something. I want us to take a look at Moses, just really quickly. Way back, and it's been several weeks, but way back, there's a personality trait about Moses that shows up early in his life, or early in the book, not necessarily early in his life. The first one is, the first incident that shows it is Moses going out to see the Hebrews, and he sees an Egyptian slave master beating a Hebrew servant, and he kills the Egyptian and buries him. The next day he goes out and he sees two Hebrews fighting, and the one he comes to the aid of the one who's being beaten, right? The loser of the fight. Once the word gets out that everybody knows that he killed the Egyptian, he flees to Midian, and when he gets to Midian, he comes to a well, and there are shepherds harassing the daughters of the priest of Midian, and Moses steps on the side of the daughters of the priest of Midian. There's something about Moses's character, okay, that just little glimpses that we see early, that Moses is on the side of the underdog, okay? Now, true, when God shows up in Exodus 3 and says, go back, Moses does everything in the world to get out of it. But we see Moses really come in to that, and this really begin to shine, not just at the first part of this, when he says, don't kill them, remember who you are and remember who they are. And now it gets even more serious, that Moses goes up and goes, forgive them. And if you can't, then kill me. Stan.
Instead of him changing God's mind, in my mind, it's the Lord saying, why don't you do some self-reflection? You need to be the leader, you're going to do this and this and this. And so maybe by saying that to him, let me just kill all of them. Most one, no, I can do this.
Right.
And so
right.
You see him start to do what the Lord wants him to do.
Right.
He doesn't go, I can't do it anymore.
Right. It is some of that. And again, it's always, to me, it's incredibly dangerous for me to start going, well, this is what God meant by that. And I mean, it just is. But we do watch Moses really come into his own here, right? Now, if you can't forgive them, then I'm one of them. Okay? Now there's a lot to take there. Linda.
A couple of things here I think that is borne out. And first of all, Moses is the one that wrote the first 5 books.
Mm-hmm.
So what we see also is a growth or a revealing of God's nature with man.
Mm-hmm.
And more than we see that a reason for prayer. I mean, God has not finalized everything in our life that may not be changed.
Right.
Because remember, David was praying for his son that
Right.
was ill, and that possibly God will change his mind. And I think in what Moses wrote, it's showing how, to me, I don't want to say personality, but perhaps God is revealing more of himself to mankind so that we can see this interrelation and how what we do affects things. And Moses was a fighter for the people after all that he'd gone through, because I think he started to see the reason for what
Very good.
God is doing.
Very good.
So here's where we're going.
Right. That's very good. We don't want to get away from this, right? Is that Scripture is given to us, right? Not written, no, wasn't written to us, but it's given to us to reveal the nature of God. right? This is his book. And we learn more and more about who he is and about what it is that he's after. Go ahead, Joy.
I'm not sure that God is changing his mind. God already knows. Right?
Okay.
I mean, so it is revealing the nature, like it's almost like a crossroads. This is going to happen, and if he prays that I'm going to show the people that I'm a loving God and that I'm willing to, in their eyes, I'm changing my mind, but in reality, I'm not sure that he's just changing, you know what I mean? Like, I think he already knows the plan.
He's
Okay.
changing what he's revealing to us.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
In Genesis 6:6, we see this same word, and there God says, I'm sorry that I made man.
Hmm.
And so if we look at the translation here, it's very possible that it's not a good translation. So when he's sorry he made man, it doesn't mean he's changing his mind about making man, but he knew before the foundation that we would sin and that he would be put into this situation where he had to destroy all of mankind. And
Right.
so he's showing us his character that I'm not happy about destroying everybody, but this is part of the plan. And so I think he's doing the same thing here. He's saying, I'm sorry that I even have to mention destroying everyone, but this is part of my plan. So I think sorry may be a better translation. It's the Hebrew word nachum, and if you study that word, I think it will give you more insight into this verse.
Yeah. See. Oh,
This talking about Jesus, or God changing his mind, I've been to a study somewhere on this before. When Jesus was going to be killed, he tried to negotiate with God.
yes.
So if he couldn't be negotiated with, who would know better than God himself?
Right. Okay. So I do want to get this in there, and we can dive some more into this if you want to. Again, this is a debate. Okay, just so you know, I don't know if it makes us feel better or not. This is a debate that's been going on for centuries, right? And all kinds of different. There's been all kinds of different writings, all different fancy theological names for what this is. But I'm glad that you brought up Jesus in Gethsemane. Because what we are getting to see is more about who God is, right? And Moses does. Moses goes up and makes the offer, right? If you can't forgive them, then take me, right? And it could certainly be seen that way. And God's answer to Moses is no. I'm not going to do that, right? I'm not going to hold you responsible for the sins of someone else. But there is one who's going to come that I'm going to do that with. There's one that's coming later. Moses is not the guy, right? But there is one that's coming. All right, I want to do this really quickly. We'll get back to this. I don't want to. We're not jumping into 33 because there's too much there, but I do want to do this. And I think these two are related, and then you can tell me I'm wrong later. That's fine. We started this off with a look at the end of, or with chapter 31. And in chapter 31, we have God giving gifts to the various people to accomplish his purpose, right? He gives one who can make all the furnishings for the tabernacle. He makes another one that would make build the actual tabernacle. There's your gifts that God's given. That seems to be the indication. And then at the end of 31, there's that stop again, and going, just in case you forgot this, Sabbath is a big deal. Sabbath is not a big deal because you don't work. Sabbath is a big deal because you remember who you are and who's done what for you, right? And we look immediately following that, and we look at what happens when we try to take credit's not the right word. What we try to do when we try to accomplish this on our own without him. right? Sabbath was meant, right? And it's incredibly serious. Anybody who profanes the Sabbath dies. Whoever works on the Sabbath is cut off from among his people. I mean, that's a big deal, because Sabbath was meant for you to go, this is the Creator. This is the one who is making the overture here to be with us. And when we try to do it outside of Him, this is where we end up. We end up in a place where He goes, I can't be there. That was the final bell. I'm sorry. Let's pray. Father, we love you. We're thankful that you hear us. We're thankful that you listen to the concerns of our heart. We're thankful for the ability that we have to ask you to bless us, to ask you to bless others, to intercede on behalf of others. Help us to have the heart of Moses, that our concern for those around us outweighs our concern. Help us to remember that it's you who have delivered us. It's your work. We're thankful that you counted us worthy. Keep us humble and our eyes fixed on you. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.